I'm offering this sermon in particular today for that person that was killed and those persons that were injured yesterday in the synagogue near San Diego. For that matter, for those victims of all shootings in all places of worship, be they Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Sikh. For that matter, for all victims of violence which pervades our culture. Jesus came and he stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And after that, he showed them his hands and his side. So, as a few of you may have guessed, I am woefully ignorant when it comes to sports. At one point, I do remember asking if the Super Bowl was basketball or football. That's bad. I know. Perhaps that explains why a few years ago, Roger Behrens pulled me aside and he said that I needed some education about one of the great moments in one of the Super Bowls, which is football. He patiently explained to me that there was a really important game that happened some time ago. It was between the undefeated New England Patriots and the underdog, which was the New York Giants. And so far, the game had been close. And finally, there was only 2 minutes left on the clock. The Giants were behind, but it was their ball. The offense was lined up on the field, and if there was any hope of them pulling ahead, they would have to move the ball a long, formidable distance to reach the goalpost. Here's the truth: it was nearly impossible. It was almost hopeless. But just then, an amazing thing happened. Just before the ball was about to be passed and the team's fate sealed as losers, the New York Giant team members who were not on the field lined up on the sidelines all the way down to where the goal line intersected. And with one collective, unified shout, they exhaled one word over and over: believe, believe, believe. Now, I wasn't there, but I ask you, did the prompting and the shouting and the plaintive cries of the team members make a difference? Did it inspire and transform the fear of those who were playing? This is the second Sunday of Easter, and once again, we try to wrap our minds around the resurrection. And since last week, there has been time to rub our eyes and look again. So what do we make of this cosmic breach of nature? This unbelievable story of Jesus bursting out of the tomb and death being conquered, and graves breaking open, and the gates of hell left swinging in the wind. Those who were huddled behind those thickly barred doors on the evening of the first day of the week would certainly have qualified as the clear losers of their day. There they were, clamped down and closed off to a threatening world. Once again, as in much of human history, brute force had won the game. Not just death, but death by crucifixion, death punctured by jeers and taunts and torture, death stripped of dignity, death designed to humiliate and to terrorize, death to send a clear and final message. There is no Messiah. There is no God who cares. There is no recourse. There's only brute power. Surely anyone looking in from outside the world today would surmise that Jesus and his homeboy team had already lost soundly. For sure, his disciples had given up, thrown in the towel. They had bolted themselves into a dark and airless and stifling room, too terrified to leave and too traumatized to scatter. Something of their dire circumstances makes me wonder if it wasn't just the fear of being crucified themselves that kept them huddled together, although that surely would have been enough. I suspect that they huddled and wept and tried to take in the shock of those past few days. A more poignant form of hopelessness may have already settled in. I wonder if they could have been asking, where do we go now? How do we crawl back to our former selves? In Jesus, they had seen a glimpse of God among them, a new way of living, an unguarded hope, a way of being alive. And once you've set hope on a different world, once you have tasted and touched the possibility of God's beloved community, once you've rubbed shoulders with the poor and the outcast and found new brothers and sisters you didn't even know you had, once you've had your feet washed and broken bread with the one destined to save the world, how do you go back home? Where do you go? What would be worth doing? Even today we might ask, where do we go for hope? How do we get past the locked doors of those same brute forces, both inside and outside ourselves, that stifle our dreams and strangle our sense of well-being? Can you hear that faint rumble from the sidelines, from the gospel writers, from the disciples themselves, from the saints and the believers of Christians of ages past? Can you hear their syncopated echo, believe, believe? I know what some of you must be saying, oh, it's nice to be here and everything, and the company is great here at Resurrection. But what difference can we make? Here's where the story gets really interesting. Here is where you can even bring your doubt. Here is where the Thomas in all of us will not be shamed or mocked or left hanging outside by himself just because he missed a few Sundays. Even today, the doubters get their say. Unless I touch his wounds, I'm not budging. So here's what happened. Jesus comes into our gathering. He appears. He materializes. And here is where language just gives out. What I mean is that he comes through the bolted door, unhampered by the same skin and bones and stuff that anchors us to this world. One of my favorite lines in Hamlet is the prince's reminder to Horatio, who's uncertain of what to make of a ghost. And Horatio says, well, there are more things in heaven on earth, Horatio, than there are dreamt of in your philosophy. In other words, there is a wider world where more things are possible than any of us can conceive. Jesus comes through the bolted door, and then he sums up his entire life mission in one word: He says, peace. And then in case they didn't hear it, he says it again. He says, peace. You know, peace in our world, it comes and goes so fast. It can change within minutes. It depends on circumstance, on illusion, on persuasion, on the wins and losses of life that comes and goes. But Jesus offers a peace that is anchored in joy, anchored in love, in the rugged beauty of outrageous kindness and truth. But there's more. Do you see what the disciples saw? Do you notice that his ghost-like apparition signaling to us to come closer? Jesus offers us his side to touch. And that's the thing. Ghosts or spirits don't do that. It is too much, really, to imagine. How do molecules reassemble in a body that we can touch? Can you hear it from the sidelines again? This time from Jesus himself? Believe. Believe. You know, when we come to worship here on Sunday mornings, we all come with a mix of faith and doubt. So I want to tell you something this morning. And in doing so, I'm talking to myself as well. There are times in life, sometimes many times, when we face grief or disappointment or pain or depression. There are times when these things happen that our hold on God falters. When these moments of true, deep doubt come, I want to urge something for you. There's something that someone once told me, and it got me through some dark nights. And if you remember nothing else from this sermon, nothing else, I want you to know these words. Never doubt in the dark what God has told you in the light. Never doubt in the dark what God has told you in the light. I say this because it is in the moments of spiritual light that God shows us his reality. And those moments of light are so important because they allow us to get through many dark nights of doubt and despair that come into each one of our lives. So in the moments of light, God has told you this, that he will never desert you. Don't ever doubt that. And in moments of light, God has told you that resurrection is reality. Don't ever let the darkness cause you to doubt that. In moments of light, God has told you that the very hairs on your head are numbered. Don't ever doubt that in the darkness. It matters that you believe, and it matters what you believe, and it matters that you believe it just enough to proclaim it loud and clear, even from the sidelines. Amen.